Well, thank you very much, John. I admire so much what you do and what CPAR does, and I admire you all for getting into those chairs as well. They're very 70s, I was thinking, reflecting just missing the shag pile carpet and the flares, but it is truly a magnificent auditorium here, and congratulations in preserving what is quite obviously an important part of local history. Well, I am delighted to be here today to talk to the Centre of Excellence in Population Ageing Research about the policy challenges and the opportunities an ageing demographic presents for Australia. CPAR, of course, have been very strong advocates for the government's recently released intergenerational report, and are equally passionate about the issues that we have raised as part of that report. It's important that we be passionate about these things and continue to raise the profile of the issue, because Australia is on the verge of an ageing boom. We are heading towards a new era, one which presents both challenges and opportunities for government, for business, and of course for society as a whole. The government started a conversation on this with the launch of the IGR last month, and I want to advance this conversation with you, particularly through Q&A. CPAR has produced a very large body of work on how the population will change in the next 40 years and how public policy will need to respond. By collaborating with universities and centres of excellence such as CPAR, we can together communicate the challenges and the policy choices we need to make as a nation. I'm pleased that this is an open public forum so that all interested members of the wider community can participate and get involved in the conversation. This audience knows well that Australians are living longer, healthier, and we're more prosperous than ever before. And that's great news, and that will continue to be the case. We currently have one of the longest life expectancies in the world, and the intergenerational report shows this will increase. A boy born today will on average live to over 91 years of age, and a girl to over 93 years of age. A child born mid-century will likely live to around 100. Our positive actions from the introduction of seatbelt laws, laws about drink driving, advances in treatments for heart disease, and with less people smoking, those changes have dramatically improved life expectancy in Australia. This means that a greater proportion of the population will be aged over 65 in the years to come. In fact, the number of Australians past the traditional retirement age of over 65 is projected to more than double by mid-century. We'll also see far more centenarians. In 1975, there were only 122 Australians over 100 years of age. Today there are 4,000 over 100 years of age. And in 40 years' time, there'll be around 40,000 Australians that'll be aged over 100. That's a city the size of Queanbeyan, where everybody is over 100 years of age. These developments are profound and will affect Australia's economic future. Our longer lives and demographic shifts mean there will be fewer people of traditional working age as a proportion of the population. For every person aged 65 and over, there are currently around 4 people aged between 15 and 65. In 40 years' time, this number will nearly halve. As you can imagine, this presents very significant challenges for our society and obviously for government. The IGR clearly shows that participation and productivity are vital to growth. And as our population shifts over time, we need to change the way we think about participation and productivity. Over the next 40 years, economic growth is expected to be slower than over the last 40 years. So what the IGR actually shows is if we want things to change, then we must change. And in particular, If we want things to stay the same, as in the quality of life we have, then we must change as well. Workforce participation and job creation are amongst this government's key objectives. Workforce participation is not just about improving economic growth. Having the ability and choice to actively participate in the workforce can be central to an individual's self-esteem. It is, in many ways, the fabric that binds a society. And I'm referring to participation in work by today's young Australians, participation by women, including those with a new family, and participation by older Australians. We must create jobs and utilise the productive potential of all our population. We need to become more inclusive of diversity in the workplace if we are to make the most of our economy, and that means recognising the value of older workers. As I said, there will soon be fewer people of traditional working age as a proportion of the population. Interestingly, the IGR projects in 40 years' time that the participation rate of those aged over 65 will rise from 1 in 8 to 1 in 6. So you can see greater workforce participation by older Australians. It's a small shift, but it's a welcome trend. If older Australians want to work later in life, then they should be given the opportunities to do so. If they wish to relax in their retirement, well, then they should have the opportunity to do that as well. This is about choice and opportunity. Opportunities that have been provided by the significant changes that have happened in our society the last 4 decades. Changes in technology, changes in mobility and access, changes in healthcare and aged care. Developments that can help people extend their time in the workforce. Australians are living longer, but their life expectancy is matched or even exceeded by the increases in health life expectancy. So whilst we might be getting older, we're also delaying the ageing process, which is hugely important. And what this means is that we can generally grow older without needing help with activities such as aged care, mobility or communication. It means that many older Australians can now choose to keep working in a way that they could not do just a few decades ago. This government is resolved to reducing and removing the barriers to workforce participation in Australia, particularly for those facing older Australians. It is a waste of natural resource and our national resource for those people to drop out of the workforce when they still have a desire to work and a positive contribution to make. I'm learning this as I'm getting older. And apparently, and I'm discovering in many cases, wisdom comes with age. I might digress here and say the other day at Bunnings I launched a toolkit with national seniors it was an employer information toolkit to help change the attitudes of employers towards older Australians. And it was part of the National Seniors proposal to work with employers. And I asked the head of National Seniors, how old do you have to be a senior? And he said, you have to be over 50. And it dawned on me I'm going to be a senior in just a few months' time, which is a very confronting moment, I must say. So I'd say to you, we all learn from ageing, and we're all experiencing what the change really does mean. And it doesn't come from the words of others. It doesn't come through the air conditioning at a university. It doesn't come through the mail. Wisdom comes through life experience. It's not something that can be bought, but it can add so much value to a workplace. In the past, we weren't always able to make the most of this wisdom and experience because life expectancies and healthy life expectancies weren't as good. But now many older Australians have the choice to extend their participation in the workforce. Improvements in health and living standards have helped, along with, importantly, the rise of less physically demanding work and new technologies. This is good for the individual, it's good for Australia. By remaining in employment for longer, older Australians can both increase their current income and save more to support themselves in retirement. They can have better opportunities to live the lifestyle that they choose. Longer participation in the workforce provides ongoing learning and greater access to evolving technology. There are also studies that show attachment to the workforce can help maintain social inclusion, help improve health outcomes over time, and this adds to the quality of life for older Australians. The increased workforce participation of older Australians is a good thing for the nation, because greater mature age participation and employment means higher household incomes for mature age workers and across the Australian economy as a whole. In last year's budget, the government announced that it was introducing the Restart program. That program encourages businesses to employ Australians 50 years and older, provides a clear and long-term financial incentive for employers to give older Australians a fair go and keep them on the payroll. Restart gives employers up to $10,000 for every person employed under the program. We will continue to encourage businesses to recognise older Australians, and we are looking at how we can make that program even more flexible in the upcoming budget. We may need to help some employers change their attitudes towards older employees, or to change workplaces to become more flexible so that older workers are able to work. Whatever the case, we cannot afford to let this large talent pool go to waste. It's not just the wisdom, skills and experience of older Australians that can benefit employers. They also contribute maturity and stability to workplaces. Older Australians are of immense value to employers, and while our participation rates of mature workers have increased sharply over the last decade, we can do better. We are still behind the United States, Canada and New Zealand. So this government is looking at the steps we can take to improve this, and I welcome the thoughts and contributions of all of you here today on this important issue. So, ladies and gentlemen, we obviously can't guarantee what Australian life will look like in the decades ahead, but the intergenerational report provides us with a glimpse of what lies ahead. And while there's still a lot that we cannot foresee, there are some things that we can be assured of. We will have an ageing demographic profile. There will be pressures on the government's budget and the delivery of services. So we need to be prepared, and we have to start today. Inaction today doesn't delay the costs, it only compounds them, particularly for future generations. This will require some reform, but all reform needs communication, broad participation and community engagement. We'll all have a role in promoting a broader understanding of the implications of population change and the implications for participation in the workforce, for productivity and for our economy. We will need to promote public understanding on the values and contributions that senior Australians can and will make. So I hope my words here today have given you food for thought as you consider those opportunities, and I, like you, very much look forward to all the challenges that we're going to face head-on together in the years ahead. Thank you very much. Oh, sure, yeah.
Thank you very much, Treasurer, for those wise words. We have some time now for Q&A. As I said before, please name and affiliation and questions that are short.
Is there a microphone? Microphone?
There's a roving microphone
Roving
here.
microphone here.
There you go.
Excellent. Thank goodness. I've either stunned you into silence or bored you to sleep.
Thanks very much. I'm David Bale, alumni invite. I just wanted to check whether the participation included unpaid work as well as paid work. Fairly simple question.
My assumption is it is assumed to be paid work. Am I wrong? I'm right. Yeah.
So there could be a whole additional number of workers working in the unpaid work that aren't actually contributing to these numbers.
Well, that's right, David, and I hear exactly what you say. I mean, there is an enormous financial contribution from people through volunteer work in particular. Often the NGO sector puts a value on that. Government has been quite lax in not putting that into the economic data, but I assume that's primarily because we have to have international comparative data in the presentation of information. So it doesn't mean it's unvalued, it's certainly immensely valued. I think there is a deep desire amongst some to have government pay for that unpaid contribution, but that is, I think that's unreal in the current environment. But I think there needs to be greater recognition of unpaid participation in work.
Thank you very much.
David. Next. David and David.
Yeah, David Uren from The Australian. The intergenerational report included a striking chart showing the difference between the outlook in 40 years' time, given what's been put through from last year's budget already, and the state of affairs had the policy parameters that the government inherited been allowed to continue. My understanding is that the biggest single component in the changes that you've been able to affect is really the changes in indexation to health and education payments to the states for hospitals and schools. Isn't that really just transferring the burden of an ageing population from the Commonwealth government to the states?
No, it isn't, because, well, firstly, the education changes were not legislated and have not yet been legislated, so they're not part of that list of measures that have been implemented. So education is in the yet to be implemented side of the equation. In relation to hospitals, there were bonus payments that were made by the previous government that we said we would honour for 4 years. But unquestionably, one of the things that has happened over the last few months is it's become obvious that the states have been able to improve efficiencies in the delivery of their hospital services. And that has been a great indicator that those people that can get greater efficiencies out of hospitals are the ones that actually run the hospitals rather than the government that doesn't run the hospitals. The federal government, apart from one hospital in Tasmania, the federal government does not run hospitals, so we will never be able to get greater efficiencies. Having said that, there is clearly a role to improve the relationship between the Commonwealth and the states in the Federation White Paper, which the Prime Minister has already put out a number of discussion papers about. And I have no doubt that tomorrow when I meet with all the treasurers, that there'll be further discussions about how we can improve the state of the Federation and reduce cost shifting from Commonwealth to state, or indeed from state to Commonwealth, which does happen as well. There's a lady over there, and then a gentleman over there. Lady, ma'am, if you could, oh, sorry. That's okay, that gentleman there and then that lady over there.
Not looking.
Thank you. Just to complete a trifecta of David's, it's David Knox from Mercer. Thank you, Treasurer, for highlighting the fact that we're living longer and we're living longer, healthier lives. And
more prosperous lives.
And more prosperous lives. Last year you indicated a desire to increase the pension eligibility age from 67 to 70. That's a significant jump, and we understand the discussion around that. I'm wondering
in 2035.
2035. But I wonder whether it would be preferable to actually link the pension eligibility age to an indicator of life expectancy rather than a flat 70, so that it's an automatic adjustment as we keep living longer.
Well, I think that has merit. And in fact, the trajectory that we went on to go from 67 to 70 was a continuation of the Labor government's trajectory to go from 65 to 67. As you can see from that chart in the IGR, it's just a continuation to 70, but still the gap grows after that. And you're right. I mean, we are endeavouring to give some consistency and stability and predictability to the retirement income system. Now, the fundamental question is whether you can do this step by step or whether you've got to take a more holistic approach, because the retirement income system, when it was first developed substantially with the age pension, obviously, back in the early 1900s, life expectancy, as you can see from the IGR, was 58. The pension kicked in at 65. Quite a few people didn't qualify, naturally enough. It's still 65, although rising at the moment. And as a result of what the previous government did, we offered bipartisan support, you recall, for that initiative, even though it was unpopular. When we wanted to continue the trajectory, we lost bipartisan support. I think now with the further development of the superannuation system, particularly in 1992, when life expectancy was around 72, we've seen since that time a whole lot of other things, such as aged care integrate with retirement incomes. The taxation system has been quite dramatically changed to make changes for retirement income purposes, and even healthcare is linking in with retirement income. So it's a lot more complicated now, the whole retirement income phase of our lives, than at any previous time. So the question is, do you change it along the way, which reduces the predictability, or do we take stock take of where the system's at? And that's something we're quite actively considering at the moment.
I have a question. May I speak?
Oh, yes, ma'am, up the back. Sorry.
Thank you. My name's Shobha Vaki, and I am Vice President of Prisoners Aid, and I am Vice Chair of the Canberra Interfaith Forum. And my question is, I too have a passion for decreasing recidivism. If you analyse the intergenerational crime rate, what way can we, they say prevention is better than cure, how can we break that cycle?
Well, Shobha, it is a good question. Recidivism is something that perhaps criminal lawyers think a lot about, but I'm not sure that legislators and the general public think a lot about. And that's because it is far easier, in a sense, to lock people up and think that the problem has gone away, but when they come out and commit a crime again, it becomes a systemic issue. And our laws of evidence I don't want to get into the whole jurisprudential debate. I feel as though I'm at a university. But I'd just say to you, it is essentially a state issue, ma'am. It's not something, we don't run any particular justice system, and certainly at a federal level, recidivism is not something that we end up dealing with, but it's something that maybe can generate debate here in the ACT with the Chief Minister, and although I'm not sure that Canberra has a jail, do they?
We do have a jail.
Oh,
We've had a jail for 5 years.
New one, right, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say something
Take me
else.
back away.
Recidivism, not just the ACT, it's
Across
Australia-wide,
yes,
and
I
it costs us X billion dollars to lock people up. I was suggesting as a solution that you have productivity and you decrease mental health and you raise productivity by utilising them and decrease crime.
Well, they're all good suggestions. Man.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just to point you in an area, Northern Territory actually has an outstanding program that I heard about a year ago, and particularly young people, getting them out of jail on day activity and taking them into the workplaces. on an anonymous basis, and no one knew that they were on day release from jail. And they've actually massively reduced the recidivism in the Northern Territory, particularly amongst Indigenous Australians, which is a very good story in itself. Yes, ma'am.
Kay Fallick from Your Life Choices website. Yes, we have an ageing population. I'm interested, because you were widely reported on saying that we would fall off our chairs when the IGR came out. And given that the fiscal gap in IGR...
It'd be hard to fall off those chairs.
These are a bit comfortable. IGR 1, the fiscal gap was 5%, 2 was 3.5%, 3 was 2.75%, and 4 has a number of 3.6. I understand 3 different trajectories. But a serious question, what, in your opinion, was the standout fall off the chair horror piece of information in this
Well, it doesn't
report?
have to be horror. You can fall off your chair with excitement as well.
Okay.
There are many statistics in there that are intriguing. I mean, what happened was every government through the IGRs has got longevity wrong. And even on the same benchmark, they've got it wrong. The second thing is we're on a trajectory for debt to GDP that in today's equivalents would have been third after Greece and Japan if we just let spending continue to grow. And I think the spending trajectory is the one of most concern, particularly given where the line is on revenues. The highest ever level of revenue is around 26% of GDP. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean tax. Tax can be part of revenue, but total government revenue was around, from memory, 26% of GDP, which occurred in the 80s. So in order to be able to meet the expenditure trajectory, we'd need to increase revenue dramatically, not to its highest level ever, but probably to its highest level ever, plus around 70 or 80%. And that's with fewer working Australians of traditional working age between 15 and 65. So the financial burden is falling on the shoulders of fewer, and the financial burden would be far, far greater. And that is simply not sustainable in a world where we are competing vigorously with countries that have much lower tax rates, including New Zealand, just across the creek. Everyone used to think, oh, New Zealand's the poor little sister, little brother. Well, New Zealand actually has substantially lower headline tax rates than Australia, and is far more aggressive in the international marketplace where they compete directly with us, for example, in dairy, and they have higher workforce participation of older New Zealanders, and they have higher workforce participation of females than we do in Australia. So there are many lessons where we can compare with other similar countries facing similar challenges. And I think they're, in aggregate, they're the things that are startling in the IGR. And if you have a look through, when you look at, for example, at our debt to GDP, Japan currently can fund its debt to GDP from domestic savings. Now, that apparently is coming to an end this year. The government debt of Japan, for the first time since World War II, is not going to be totally funded by domestic savings, for the first time. So no one was overly concerned about Japan. And Japan's demographic has been, their population is actually decreasing substantially. So Japan wasn't the issue. Greece, it's self-explanatory. So on the current trajectory of spending, or what we inherited, we would be coming third. That's unacceptable. Now, we've addressed half of that, but there's still a long way to go.
Peter Martin from The Age, sir.
Peter,
You've said that every IGR has got things wrong, and that's not surprising.
It is not surprising.
As the future changes. One of the things every IGR has got wrong is population. Population has grown faster than projected in every IGR. You've projected a convenient number of 39 well, it's just under 40 million.
39.5.
Just under 40 million. And you've done that by assuming a steady rate in numerical terms, falling as a proportion of immigration. I'm wondering whether the odds are that that's wrong too, that we will have a much bigger Australia, or at the very least a bigger Australia than you've projected. Because think about it, you're running short of workers, aren't we going to increase immigration?
Well, if that's assuming that they want to come here in larger and larger numbers, and that in
They won't want to come here?
Well, the point is that in terms of the skill base, there has been a complete reset. Since the first IGR, there has been a reset in the composition of immigration. And that has been a bipartisan approach to increase skilled migration. And the norm in the IGR also includes students studying. So obviously, since, say, 1990, there has been a dramatic increase in the number of foreign students studying in Australia, which is counted as part of the norm, net overseas migration number. So the composition has changed over the last few years. Since Peter Costello encouraged Australians to have one for mum, one for dad and one for Australia, a number of Australians have actually, including me. And so the interesting thing is, well, what is potentially going to hold that back? So it's, you know, the birth rate we are seeing is pretty much unchanged. In terms of net overseas migration, we see students studying in Australia increasing, but you don't necessarily expect that there's going to be ever-increasing numbers that want to come here to live as educated people unless they study here or there are events offshore that are going to change the nature of, there might be instability offshore. We are seeing, you know, I mean, the truth is, in some of our programs, we were advised that demand is coming to Australia. So the number we actually put on the NOM is more realistic and more contemporaneous than any government has previously put on the NOM for the IGR. That's the truth. Whoever's got a microphone.
Dr. Terry Dwyer, Dwyer Lawyers. It's 50 years since I went to school and went to a school reunion. Lord De Lisle was the Governor-General, Robert Menzies was the Prime Minister, and this country has changed enormously. Why should anyone care about what it's going to be like in 50 years? It'll be a different country. And if we care so much about spending, why do we run an inheritance subsidy scheme called the age pension and not recoup the age pension out of estates? And I speak as a potential beneficiary of a house in Northbridge.
Not sure about the last bit of it, but what, recoup the age pension from whom, sorry?
From deceased estates. I'm not advocating a death duty. I'm not advocating a death duty, but why subsidise inheritance?
Well, what we've seen with death duties around the world is that there is, has been a significant tendency for high net worth individuals to reduce their liability.
I'm not in favour of death duty, it's just recoup from the estate.
And in a sense, the people that are captured are usually middle or lower income people that have been caught in cases of death duties. Australians rejected death duty some years ago. It is certainly not in the contemplation of this government to reintroduce death duties, I can say to you. But and the tax system is very different today to what it was previously. You're absolutely right. Australia is very different today to what it was 40 or 50 years ago. And whatever we are trying to predict Australia is going to look like in 40 years' time is inevitably going to be wrong. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't undertake things now that strengthen our position in 40 years' time. It's like building a dam or building the Snowy Mountain scheme. It's about building for tomorrow. And the intergenerational report gives us enough information to be able to start building for tomorrow. That's what we're doing. We're endeavouring to build for tomorrow. And if we can see problems coming, if we can see challenges coming, let us fix them now and not pass the buck to a future generation. That's why I'm in public service. That's why many of you care about your children and so on. It is about preparing for tomorrow. And if we can undertake action now that is a minor change here and significant change over there that is going to make tomorrow so much better and helps us to be more resilient for the future, then let us take that action now. Yes, sir.
I think it's me now.
Yes, it is.
David Richardson from the Australia Institute. In your speech today, you emphasised the importance of workforce participation and technology and the role that health, technology, by implication education, is going to play in economic growth into the future, productivity. But none of those things are in the intergeneration report. It's assumed that productivity growth is 1.5% per annum forever, no matter what. Do you take that as a very serious criticism of the intergeneration report?
No. And why? Because there are many things that could have been in the report. International economic challenges. Climate change has more recognition and more space in the report than global economic volatility. So there are many things that are not there that if we were going to spend 12 months working on the report that you could put in.
Should the warning be on the cover?
Sorry? Should a warning be on the cover? I think a warning's on the cover of everything any government publishes in one form or another. And the fact is, there are many inputs. This is the debate we should have. How can we improve productivity? Now, I know there were contentious changes to higher education, but I met with a number of startups the other day, startups. Some of them are multi-billion-dollar Australian companies in technology. And there was this deep desire to work closer with the universities, but they were finding it very, very difficult. And because of entrenched attitudes at some universities. And you compare that with Stanford in Silicon Valley or some of the other universities in California or around the world, and there is a closer collaboration between business and the universities. Now, the Vice-Chancellors collectively are saying we want to work closer with the business community, we want to have a more commercial approach to universities, but the reforms failed to pass the Senate. It has to happen, as John Dawkins and Gareth Evans and all these other people who are not natural supporters of our side of politics have said. We're going to have change in higher education, because if we don't, these companies, which are more mobile than ever before, are simply going to take their technology and their innovation to another university somewhere else. And with the emergence of campuses that have 200,000 students in Asia, these are campuses with massive, massive economic firepower. They're being built, they're emerging, they're in operation on our doorstep. Australian innovators are going to move and set up in partnership with those campuses to the cost of Australian universities and Australian students. So that's why we need to, reform higher education as one area. That helps to improve productivity, there's no doubt about that. Microphone, you've got it, ma'am, yep.
Hello, Ginny Sargent from the Research School of Population Health here at the ANU.
Yes.
Not CPAR, but I'm interested in our research about work and health. So we know that work can be good for health, so there's a interest there in keeping people in work,
yes.
And workforce participation for older workers. But the concern is that workers with poorer health are less likely to stay in the workforce and therefore less likely to be in the workforce as they get older. Have you got any plans for increasing preventive health to keep the workers healthier and keep people in the workforce longer?
Well, it really is a question for the Minister of Health, as we have a number of preventative health programs.
Which were cut in the last budget there. Australian National
Well,
Mental Health Agency.
Almost everything was cut in the last budget for various reasons.
Terminated, I think, is the word that was used.
I'm not going to dispute which programs were terminated, but having said that, we also continue to increase health expenditure substantially. In fact, this year our expenditure on health increased from memory by about 9%, which is well above inflation, well above health inflation, and obviously well above the speed of the economy in real terms. And I can't get into a debate about preventative health versus all the other aspects of health, but I'd just say this. You're absolutely right. If older Australians have poorer health, the question is, how can we improve that in order to help to facilitate workforce participation? Now, technology is going to be our best friend in this regard, and it will help in relation to medical research. That's one of the reasons why we are absolutely committed to the Medical Research Future Fund, because this is a great strength of Australia. And I visited a Centre for Ageing and Medical Research in Concord in Sydney recently, and they have groundbreaking research, global research, in relation to delaying the ageing process, which is effectively one of the things that, is one of the most significant preventative health measures you can make, but they desperately need research money. So we actually came with a plan to develop the biggest research infrastructure commitment in Australia's history and one of the largest in the world, because this is a great area of strength for Australia, medical research. We remain absolutely committed to it, despite the fact that we've lost half the funding or a percentage of the funding for that medical research. But that is about investing in as much about preventative health as it is about quality of health. And we are determined to proceed with the Medical Research Future Fund and continue to increase funding for medical research, because that will be one of the major contributors through innovation, not just technological innovation, but obviously all sorts of medicinal innovation as well. There are many other areas where we continue to invest. Obviously the PBS being one of them that continues to have ever-growing increase in funding. And obviously the recommendations that come forward for new drugs are about better drugs that in turn help to alleviate immediate illnesses that may end up contributing to chronic illnesses and deteriorations in quality of health. So the argument about preventative health is, where do you start? And I'm not a medical expert in that regard, but yes, I agree with you. We want to increase workforce participation. Yes, sir. You've got the microphone. If you've got the microphone, you're in control.
George Goodenough from CPAR. The latest IGR projects implications of proposed policy changes for the budget, but it provides little insight into who bears the cost of such policies.
Yeah.
So does it concern you that such important part of policy analysis are not in the report?
Who bears the cost?
Of the proposed policy.
Of proposed policy. We all do. We all do. We're all taxpayers, one form or another. Even if you're retired and you're receiving a non-taxable income, or you don't hit tax-free threshold, we all pay tax, GST. We pay rates on our homes, or we pay it through our rent. We all pay tax. I keep saying to state and federal colleagues and local government, it's not about who spends the money. It all comes from the same taxpayer, whether it's the federal government, the state government, local government, or if business that comes up to us and says, if you give us this income stream, we'll be able to deliver this service. And I say, terrific, but that's effectively a tax. It all comes from the same individual. There's only so much juice you can get out of one lemon. And the problem is that if we keep spending more and the state keeps controlling the spending of more and more of your money, you have less control over your money, you have less control over your lives, and ultimately the people best able to determine what's in their interests are individuals. And for those most vulnerable in the community, for those that we all have a responsibility to help, for those that are part of the social compact, the government has a role to step in on your behalf and make sure that no one is left behind. But also, the safety net cannot become a cargo net into which people fall and never get out. We've got to give them the chance to bounce back out. And that's part of the welfare reform that we are talking about at the moment. This will need to be the last one, sir.
Thanks, Treasurer. It's Michael Moore. I'm the CEO of the Public Health Association of Australia and an adjunct professor at the University of Canberra. You started really with an assumption about the ageing of the population, people getting to 100 years old in the not too distant future, and you mentioned that that's partially around seatbelts and smoking and so forth.
On the trajectory, in the IGR, you can see in the 70s it started to flatline life expectancy, but then it picked up again. And when I asked the Treasury, well, why did it pick up again? They said they were seatbelt laws, random breath testing, better management of chronic heart disease. It was really an interesting. It doesn't mean it might flatline again, but if you make the assumptions about technology, then you can keep going. And you'll remember at the beginning.
Not about technology though. They weren't
counting technology. No.
And there's a very point I'm getting to. So actually, when you're making those predictions, in fact, many public health academics have written just the opposite, that because of the obesogenic environment, because of the harm associated with alcohol, that we're actually going to see just the opposite happening, a reduction in life expectancy. And you said in answer to the question to Jenny, well, let's have a medical solution. No, it's not a medical solution. The question is, what do you do about it? And there's a couple of starting points. The first one is stop the obesogenic and alcoholic environment by preventing marketing of junk food, marketing of alcohol. But it does take intervention. So my question to you is, you talked about the Medical Research Fund, but actually it was never a health and medical research fund, despite the fact that we know our greatest improvements in health and our greatest increases in life expectancy have actually been about preventive health. When are you going to start doing those sorts of interventions?
Yeah. Well, again, it's a good question, but I must say I'm not the Minister for Health, and I can't get into a debate about alcoholism and obesity in one sense, because
it's really about the assumptions in this report, actually.
No, I understand that, but I also pointed out that breakthroughs in the management of heart disease actually did contribute to that improvement.
And vaccines, sure.
Sorry, and reduction in smoking, which satisfies part of your concern.
Yeah. And vaccines.
And there's no doubt about vaccination and a range of other things. But it's part of the equation as well. It is part of the equation. You could also say occupational health and safety made a contribution, a range of other things. So we've got to look at the aggregate. This is higher level. You're asking me to opine on particular medical policy at a particular point in time, and I won't be drawn
fundamental in this report, though, Joe.
Well, it's part of the contribution in this report, part of the contribution. But you're right. And look, it all comes back as well to the basic human instinct that we want to live longer for better quality life, right? So there will be many government decisions or community decisions along the way that will change the nature of the outcomes of this report, as you would expect. I'm not saying this is what Australia will look like in 40 years' time, but I am saying there are some obvious trends. If you follow the trends. Now, the trajectory on debt and deficit, it assumes that if nothing were done, well, someone is going to have to do something because it's clearly unsustainable. Someone, somewhere is going to have to do it. And what we're saying is we're prepared to step up to the plate. Right? We're prepared to have a go. because we know there's a looming problem, and it's like everything. If you know there's a looming problem, you can take action where appropriate. Governments have to make choices about what action they take. And some of that will be popular, some will be unpopular. But we've got to do what is right. That's what we've got to believe to be right as public policy, to do what is right. And I'd say to you in conclusion, we welcome your contribution. And finally, can I thank everyone for coming along and giving me your time? Thank you very much.